What's happening, everybody? On today's show, we will go around the conference as Missouri loses their defensive coordinator to the NFL. A&M and Georgia announce their spring game dates, and Arkansas basketball gets a hefty fine. Also, former Tennessee Volunteer and current New England Patriots coach Jerod Mayo is going to join us. We'll get his thoughts on what Josh Heupel is building down in Knoxville, and we'll get Mike Golic's thoughts on Brian Kelly leaving Notre Dame for LSU. Locked on SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what is happening, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. Great to have you guys along. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. And remember, Locked On SEC is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube and at LockedOnSEC.com. Let's jump into it. Let's go around the conference.
Boots out to the right. Interception. Takes the handoff. Throws in front of the ball. What a catch.
Around the conference.
And we start up at Missouri as Eli Drinkwitz and the Missouri Tigers are looking for a new defensive coordinator after Steve Wilks accepted an NFL job on Wednesday. Wilks is headed back to Charlotte to become a member of the Carolina Panthers staff, where he will serve under head coach Matt Rule as the team's secondary coach. On Wednesday, Drinkwitz issued a statement saying, "We wish Steve, Marcy, and their family the best as they return home to Charlotte. Coach Wilks was a strong asset to our program and our staff. Thank him for his commitment to Missouri football." So, Missouri on the hunt for their next defensive coordinator as they lose Steve Wilks very quickly as their DC. It was kind of rough early on in the year for Mizzou, but their defense did play much better down the stretch of the season that led to a couple of wins. Meanwhile, the Georgia Bulldogs, they will begin the 2022 college football season as the reigning national champs. But on Wednesday, the Bulldogs revealed the first of their 15 spring practices will start on March 15th, and the annual G-Day spring game will be played at Sanford Stadium on Saturday, April 16th. So if you're a Dog fan, circle that date on your calendar. Stetson Bennett will return to lead the Georgia offense. But the defense will have plenty of new faces, losing the likes of Darian Kendrick, Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean, and others. But we will get to see Georgia, the new-look Georgia Bulldogs, reigning national champs on April 16th. Speaking of Georgia, on Wednesday, FootballScoop.com reported that the Dogs were expected to hire a well-respected ACC special teams coordinator who spent the last 8 years working with David Cutcliffe at Duke. Kirk Benedict, who had an 8-year run on Cutcliffe's Duke staff, is joining Georgia. According to the report, Benedict will likely join the Dogs in a special teams analyst role. So always good when you can get a guy with that kind of experience on your staff. Flipping it over, Texas A&M, they brought in the best recruiting class ever assembled during this recruiting cycle, and Aggie fans very excited to see some of those guys in uniform. Aggie fans, mark your calendar. Just announced the maroon and white game will be played on Saturday, April 9th at 1 p.m. Central. Aggies will face a really tough schedule this year, but we'll see what the offense looks like, what the quarterback play looks like. Remember, Max Johnson coming over from LSU, as well as Haynes King coming back from that injury, and Connor Weigman, the top one of the top quarterback recruits in this class. Going to be fun to see what the Aggies look like as they get ready for 2022. Some news over at Alabama as Doug Marrone, who worked on the Alabama staff, coaching the offensive line this past season. There are reports that he will join Dennis Allen's staff with the New Orleans Saints. So Doug Marrone, former head coach of the Bills and Jacksonville Jaguars, plenty of NFL experience, sounding like he will jump back into the pros. Again, Alabama's offensive line play, a mixed bag this year outside of Evan Neal. So some Bama fans may be happy to see Doug Marrone leave. One guy that started his career at Auburn who was climbing up draft boards, we saw him at the Senior Bowl last week, but quarterback Malik Willis had a nice showing at Auburn's spring game back in 2019 when he was an Auburn Tiger. Then Coach Gus Malzahn went a different way, prompting Willis to transfer to Liberty, where he became a star. But in a profile from Chase Goodbread at NFL.com, he said Willis said his attitude about watching film is what led to his transfer. He said watching film at Auburn, not watching film at Auburn was the root of why he never saw the field. It culminated with Gus Malzahn informing him following spring practice in 2019 that he would not be considered for the quarterback competition. Willis said, I was so immature. I just played really well in the spring game, but I learned the hard way that the spring game doesn't matter. I decided after that I had to be better, but I needed to find somewhere else to play. Will be interesting to see where Willis goes in this draft. Some people think top 10 potentially. Now, speaking of Malik Willis, Liberty will be holding their pro day on March 24th. Also having their pro day on March 24th will be Cincinnati and also Ole Miss. So that means Matt Corral, Desmond Ridder, and Malik Willis will all be throwing on the same day. So if you're an NFL team looking at taking one of those guys in the first round, you're going to have to decide, where do you send your scouting department? Obviously, you can attend all three, but if you're a GM, you can only go to one. So it'll be interesting to see who decides to go where, and be interested to see what pecking order all these quarterbacks go in. Certainly, Corral and Malik Willis expected to go in the first round. Desmond Ridder, a lot of mock drafts have him there as well. In some SEC hoops news, we mentioned Arkansas. They took down number 1 Auburn on Tuesday night in overtime. The fans were excited. They stormed the court in celebration, but now it's going to cost them, as the SEC announced on Wednesday a fine for the celebration. According to a release from the league office, the Hogs will pay $250,000 for a third offense under the league's access to competition area policy. Arkansas was last fined for a violation following its football game against Texas back in September. Been a good year for Arkansas in many sports. That fine will go into the SEC Postgraduate Scholarship Fund. Now, speaking of SEC hoops, Joe Lunardi from ESPN, he shared his bracketology update yesterday. He's got the Florida Gators, who've won 3 straight. They have boosted up from first 4 out to last 4 in. So he's got the Gators in, and he's got Mississippi State, meanwhile, in his first 4 out. So here are the 8 teams featured in his bracketology. He's got Auburn in, still as the number 1 seed, despite losing in overtime to Arkansas the other night. He's got Kentucky in as a 2 seed. If Kentucky keeps playing well, they can find their way into the number 1 conversation. And you got to go down to the 5 seed Tennessee, LSU in as a 7 seed, Alabama in as a 6 seed, Arkansas in as a 7 seed, and Florida in as a 12 seed. Crazy to think a few weeks ago, LSU and Bama were thought to be 4 seed or higher. And a lot of losses have contributed to them falling back. Last tidbit, always good to get a shot from Steve Spurrier. Never misses a chance to send a zinger at a rival. On Tuesday night during the South Carolina men's basketball game against Kentucky, Spurrier was in town to deliver the Steve Spurrier First-Year Coach Award to Shane Beamer. Following their success this past season, of course, Beamer shared the award with Josh Heupel at Tennessee. But Spurrier got on the mic and said, hey, our Gamecocks gave those Tar Heels a solid trouncing up there in Charlotte. Of course, referring to the Duke's Mayo Bowl win for the Gamecocks over North Carolina. We just need to put the microphone in front of Steve Spurrier more often. Makes for a whole lot more entertaining SEC. And there you have it. That is Around the Conference. Thank you guys again for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, we will talk with Jerod Mayo of the New England Patriots. That's coming your way next. BetOnline got you covered with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues to march towards the big game this weekend. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just football. Of course, BetOnline has up-to-the-minute info on pro and college hoops, NHL, boxing, UFC, along with live real-time updates of current games. So don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available for the 2022 season, and particularly get in on some of those prop bets with the big game this weekend. I'm talking everything from first touchdown thrown to, of course, point spread. You can do live point spread if you get in there once the game gets going. They have got you covered with just about everything, and you definitely want to make the game this weekend that much more interesting. The big game, you know which one. BetOnline, it is where the game starts. Rolling along here, Locked On SEC, and real excited to get this guy on, a former Tennessee Volunteer who is now coaching with the New England Patriots. Jerod Mayo will join us in just a second, but thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen. A quick reminder, the NBA trade deadline is Thursday, February 10th. Of course, if you're listening to it today at 2 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Eastern, the Locked On NBA podcast will be covering it live from 2 to 4 Eastern. Join Kim Becker, John Corrales, and Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to get analysis of every blockbuster move. Subscribe to Locked On NBA YouTube and turn your notifications on so you know when they go live. All right, without further ado, let's get him in here. Let's catch up with Jerod Mayo from the New England Patriots joining us now. Jerod, what's going on, man? Welcome in, and thanks so much for joining us.
What up, man? What's going on? Pretty pumped to be here. You know, I'm very comfortable in the trenches, so let's knock it out the park.
I'm with you, Jerod. You are a former Tennessee Vol, played for the New England Patriots. Now you coach for the New England Patriots. Let's just start there. You know, when you hung it up and decided to stop playing in the NFL, did you know you wanted to transition to being a coach after your playing career was over?
I did. You know, I knew I enjoyed developing people. I enjoy the game of football. So whether it's football or anything else, I just enjoy getting people to the place they want to get to. And it's never really been about me. You know, I was raised that way. It's been about the team, and it's been about helping people. And there's no better way for me to do that but to be coaching right now. So.
Your name popped up in NFL circles this offseason. You got to interview for a couple of jobs out there. Just curious, what was the interview process like for you with the jobs that you did interview for?
Yes. You know, this year it was the Raiders and the Broncos, and then last year was the Eagles. They were all great experiences for me. You know, even though I'm going into my fourth year of coaching this year, to be even considered or mentioned amongst those names, to be interviewed has definitely been a blessing for me. Definitely learned a lot from all of those teams, and it's good to get outside of the New England bubble and just see how other people think about things. Because I went into those interviews saying, you guys aren't just interviewing me, I'm interviewing you as well. You know, because all jobs aren't good jobs. And so that was the mindset that I took, and I try to take some things back and put it in my personal notebook, things I would use or things I wouldn't use. So it was a good experience for me.
Let me ask you this: is it tough game planning in your current job when you have all these? You know, I got to imagine when you got all these different interviews going on, it's got to be tough to balance game planning for the next game and also doing what you need to do with all these interviews for other jobs.
Not really. And look, I'm in a unique situation where I played football, then I worked in the business world for 3 years, and then I came back to coaching football. And then also, like, you know, I've had people offer me defensive coordinator roles, you know, asking me if I wanted to do that. But from my perspective, you know, first and foremost, it's about family. I know a lot of people say that. And for me to take a defensive coordinator role, I would have to pick my family up from Massachusetts and drop them off. So I think it's important for people to remember when these coaches, no matter what kind of coach, you know, position coach, head coach, coordinator, like, you're disrupting a lot of people. Right, you're disrupting a lot of people in the household, which is always difficult. Now, with that being said, you know, I'm not doing this for the money, so I don't even think of, like, as a player, you know, you get that rookie contract, you're like, man, I got to get to that second contract. You kind of, and once you get close, you're kind of thinking about that a little bit. But as a coach, like, at least for me, I'm not really thinking about it like that because I'm okay regardless. I coach because I love to coach. I coach because I love to develop young men and young women, because now we have women in the industry as well. I just like to develop people and get them to where they want to go. I want to get them to their daydreams, right? And so for me, I'm good regardless. I'm good. Now, my mindset is everybody eats, and then everybody eats is through development. How do you develop? You develop through good habits, right? Good habits create a good routine. And if you're able to do that day after day after day and fall in love with the boring things, then you'll get to that daydream that you spoke of previously.
Talking with the great Jerod Mayo, of course, former Tennessee Volunteer. He's going to be, if you're watching the big game this weekend, he's going to be in a Super Bowl commercial with Hellman's. You're doing the Super Bowl commercial, getting to tackle people, put the pads back on. This had to be fun to partner with them for a good cause.
But really, it all comes down to food waste. It doesn't matter men, women, kids. It doesn't matter, right? We're out here trying to tackle food waste in partnership with Hellman's, and that's what it's all about. Like I learned a lot during this campaign, which usually when you do these commercials, you don't learn anything. But the Hellman's team was great. They taught me about, we waste 40% of the food in the U.S., which is crazy. That's almost half the food, and 40% of that is in our homes. So when you think about that, and you think about this Sunday where there's going to be a lot of food on the table, let's think about putting that in the fridge and then whipping something up the next day, just like we do on Thanksgiving. Let's do the same thing every single day, and we can make an impact, make a true impact as far as food waste is concerned.
No doubt. And it's a great integration with mayonnaise, your name, Mayo. And you got to work with Pete Davidson from Saturday Night Live in the Hellman's commercial. What was it like getting to work with him?
It was great, man. This guy's a funny guy, on camera, off camera. I could just tell, he's just a funny guy all the time. It was great to work with him. A lot of fun stories on set. This guy's eating the food. You know how they make the food look all nice. He's eating the food. They have to come back in, make the food nice again for the shoot. And this is one of those goofy guys that, you would love to hang around.
Yeah, and just to let our listeners know, during the game on Sunday, Hellman's will be hosting a food waste tackle activation to help out with that. One more for you, because I'm a big college football fan, a big SEC guy, and I know you played at Tennessee, and it's sad to say is the last time Tennessee was relevant was when you were playing there.
Oh,
but
no doubt.
But now they're kind of starting to turn things around with Josh Heupel. Just curious your thoughts on what he's done so far.
Yeah, I thought Heupel has done a great job in his first year coaching, and I really look forward to him getting his guys in there. And when I say his guys, like the recruits that he has handpicked, and the offense is going to be good. You just got to get that defense right. I might have to go down there and spend a week. Have him call me.
Well, one more for you, Jerod, before we let you go. It has to be weird with you, a guy who was such a hard hitter in the NFL. It's got to be weird with all these penalties that call now, what used to be clean hits. Are you having to coach up your linebackers on how to hit safely and that sort of thing? Because, man, it seems like they're just throwing flags on everything nowadays.
Yeah, there are definitely times, especially over the last few years, where, and it feels bad when you have to tell a player, I don't know what to tell you, but these are moving targets and things are moving fast out there. Receivers are dropping their head, and I'm coming in at his chest where his chest was, but now his head's there. I can't stop my momentum, especially when you're talking about a 255-pound guy running full speed. So it's tough. And don't even get me started on the quarterback protections. I mean, you think about the target that you have to hit a quarterback, it is a tough business. And anytime a quarterback gets out, I've always told my guys, like, anytime you get a quarterback out in the open field, this will be one of the hardest tackles you can make. This guy can slide. He can take a guy like Josh Allen, for example. He can slide. He can run around you, or he can run through you. And so if he slides and you're going to hit him like he's going to run through you, penalty, right? If you try to lighten up a little bit because you think he's going to slide and he runs through you, now you're on Sports Center. So it's definitely, it's tough. It's tough.
Jerod Mayo, Tennessee, great. Been a great pleasure catching up with you, man, and best of luck to you in your coaching future, right?
I appreciate you guys. It's an easy interview, man. Thanks for everything.
All right, there he is, Jerod Mayo, former Tennessee Vol, now with the New England Patriots, coaching them and interviewing for jobs all across the NFL. He'll be a head coach very, very soon. All right, we'll take a quick break. We'll step aside. When we come back, we will hear from the great Mike Golic. We'll get his thoughts on Brian Kelly leaving Notre Dame for LSU. That's coming your way right after this. We're along here, locked on SEC, and we'll be catching up with some guys throughout Super Bowl week. And earlier today on my other radio show I do, got to catch up with Mike Golic, of course, Mike Golic Sr., formerly part of Mike and Mike. And, of course, he's a big Notre Dame guy, as his family is, and had to just get a quick question in from Mike on his thoughts on Brian Kelly, longtime Notre Dame coach, finally jumping ship and heading to the SEC, where he will coach LSU. Here was Mike Golic and me asking him about that.
quick perspective on you're an Irish guy. Thoughts on Brian Kelly going to LSU? I'm an LSU guy. We got some LSU listeners in our audience. What do you think he's going to do there, especially when you consider each of the last three coaches at LSU have won a national championship?
Well, I think that's why he's there. It was a bit of a shock because Notre Dame never had a coach leave. The coach either retired or was fired from Notre Dame. They never left to go somewhere else. And Brian did. And listen, we know how it works in college right now. It's not shocking. Like I said, it was a little shocking because it hadn't happened like that at Notre Dame. But Brian feels that at LSU, he will have a more consistent chance to win a national championship than at Notre Dame, where they've made the playoffs. It hasn't gone well, but they've made it. And occasionally they can get there. And at the end of the day, we know places like Notre Dame, Stanford have different, academic requirements to get in. It can be tougher to get a depth of the top athletes. And you can do that at LSU. And I think that's the one thing missing from Brian Kelly's resume, right? He's gotten everything else except the national championship. And I think he feels he has more of a consistent chance year in and year out to get there. So, coaches make their decisions for different reasons. Oh, and probably the bag he obtained was a pretty damn big one.
Again, that was our brief conversation with Mike Golic, formerly of Mike and Mike, sharing his perspective on Brian Kelly jumping to LSU. Just a quick other little tidbit I wanted to throw in. Our buddy Ryan Brown over at Next Round Live, they had Alabama AD Greg Byrne on their show this week. And Byrne did confirm with them that Alabama will be looking to start beer sales this basketball season. And they said if all goes well, they will consider expanding to other spectator sports. So any diehard Bama fans or other fans across the SEC that are traveling to Tuscaloosa, sounding more and more like some of these other schools that haven't started the beer sales yet, are going to be coming around, including the Alabama Crimson Tide. Look, everybody on the surface I get. If you're an outsider, you look at it and say, oh, that's a great idea. A bunch of drunks in the SEC just start selling beer. Look, the schools have started doing it, have had very little issues in terms of, out of control drunks. But here's the thing. The reality is people have been coming to SEC football games for years finding ways to drink. Go into any bathroom in SEC Stadium at the start of the fourth quarter, you know what you're going to find? Empty flasks and bottles of liquor that have been disposed of there. They're getting them in. Why not make some money off of it and sell it? I remember talking with one of the guys at the University of Texas when they passed it a few years ago. They made $1 million on alcohol or beer sales in their first year of selling them at football games. That's SEC revenue. And I remember kind of talking with SEC, the SEC commissioner a couple of years ago about that. And, he kind of was more of the, I guess, reserved perspective, conservative perspective, I guess you could say, on it. And even he's come around to it because he knows the money that the schools, the universities, and of course the conference can make off of doing it. Do it safely, do it the right way. But I think people, again, the thought is you're drinking anyway. They're drinking at your games anyway. Sell them some beers and make money off of that. And so sounding like Alabama's going to go that route. Kentucky may be the one that might take a while. But we've seen LSU's had great success as well as other schools across the SEC. So continue to keep you up to date on that, and we'll track that as we get closer to yet another football season. That is going to do it for this edition of Locked On SEC. I'm Chris Gordy. My thanks to Jerod Mayo for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow getting you set for a big weekend of SEC hoops action. And also, we're going to start turning the page previewing next week's start of SEC baseball season. We're having some special guests join us in the next couple of days as well. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks so much for listening to Locked On SEC and making us your first listen every day. Now go make your second listen. Check out the Locked On Bets podcast with your boy Q and Lee Sterling. And you can check out all our other great podcasts on the Locked On Podcast Network as well. Just about every SEC school, we've got you covered now. And we'll start taking our early looks at spring ball for a lot of the SEC schools too as well in the coming weeks. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. Talk to you guys tomorrow.